NFL.com posted a top 101 free agents list on Tuesday. It was written by Greg Rosenthal. Now, the current top 5 in order as of this recording here, it initially had Zach Bond a part of it, but he ended up signing an extension yesterday, so it kicked him off the list, and we went with 1, 2, 3, I think 5 and 6, or 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6. I think Bond might have been number 3. Now, what we're going to do here is run through these 5 guys, and we're going to talk about teams that could be interested and then selecting the team that I do think they wind up with here. So, first person on the list, coming in at number 1, is Milton Williams. Milton Williams is a name that I did not expect to see at the top of this list because there are a few other guys that I like a little bit more than him that I would have put atop of the list, but he seems to be gaining a lot of steam right now, and it really has to do with how he looked in the NFC. He had a good season overall, but more of a rotational role type of guy. I think he only had 7 starts technically this past season, but I mean, when you look at what he did in the NFC Championship and in the Super Bowl, I can understand where people are coming from here, especially with his age. Teams like the Panthers, the Cardinals, and the Patriots make a ton of sense for me here. And in my eyes, it's really going to come down to just who's more than willing to give him the highest dollar amount possible to get him in their door. Now, for me, out of those 3 teams, I decided to settle on the Carolina Panthers. While the Arizona Cardinals definitely need upgrades along the defensive line, and the New England Patriots themselves also definitely need upgrades on the defensive line, especially with there is a bit of an uneasy feeling flowing through at least like the New England media right now about Christian Barmore and what happens with him and the blood clot situation he's dealing with. So I'm hoping, obviously, all ends up going well and he continues to play and it doesn't end up being an issue, but nobody feels like 100% certain about the direction that's going. So even more pressing, I would say, on the Patriots end than Arizona. But Carolina here, after getting rid of Brian Burns, really needs to step up and try to, and this is not a make good by any means, because I don't think I would put Milton Williams and Brian Burns in the same category of effective pass rushers. But I will say that this at least goes in the direction of trying to make good on that move, because once Carolina got rid of Brian Burns, this past season was not good for them. Finishing the season 29th in sacks and 32nd in pressure rate, you basically killed your pass rush getting rid of Brian Burns last offseason. And on top of that, you got rid of him a year too late because you had 2 firsts on the table and you opted to not trade him, and then the trade compensation you got the following year was awful, considering what you could have had. So for me, I like the Carolina Panthers here. They've got to do something about the pass rush over there, and Milton Williams, a guy who has played really well over the last few years and really flourished in the Eagles system, I think would be a nice upgrade for them over there in Carolina. The guy that is number 2 on this list here, Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle from Baltimore. A lot of people seem to think he's going to hit free agency because this is a team that has just so much talent over there in Baltimore that there's only so much money that can go around, and it feels like Ronnie Stanley is working his way to hitting free agency. Now, I have 2 teams pegged for this one here. My third team is Baltimore because in my eyes, there just feels like there would be some way that they could figure it out. But the 2 actual teams as far as new destinations are concerned are the Patriots and the Chiefs. The Patriots, one of the worst, if not the worst, offensive lines last season. You absolutely need to address left tackle. And Ronnie Stanley, coming off of a nice, healthy year, could be the guy you need at that left tackle spot. That also doesn't force you to have to go into the draft and need to spend what feels like half of your selections on offensive linemen just to field a viable offense next year. So Patriots make a lot of sense there. And then there's the Chiefs, and we kind of talked about this earlier too, with Joe Thuney having to play left tackle for you in the Super Bowl because of injuries and just where you were. That's not ideal. Now, Ronnie Stanley, this feels very similar to what they did a few years ago once they lost to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. Offensive line looked really bad. A lot of injuries dealt there. They went and they spent a lot of money. Orlando Brown Jr., I believe, is who they went and they picked up. This time around, it's Ronnie Stanley. This would make a lot of sense for me here. And with Patrick Mahomes and the way his contract is set up, you can restructure and just move money around, it seems, with that 10-year deal he's on. And the next thing you know, boom, $25 to $30 million in cap space is all of a sudden opened up. And I mean, the way I see it right now, now, it's basically just a lot of teams just handing out money well in advance of when they were supposed to lower that cap number. And if there's anyone that I'm more than willing to just hand cash to as an NFL owner, it's probably Patrick Mahomes above everybody else. $35 million in cash to drop that money down as a signing bonus. Sure, here you go, Mahomes. Like, why not? You're already 3 Super Bowls deep with us. Here's another $35 million ahead of schedule kind of deal. So, I mean, the Chiefs and the Patriots, I do think both have very viable cases for going after Ronnie Stanley. And on the Chiefs front, you could maybe offer him a little bit less, but also the opportunity to chase for that ring. Whereas the Patriots, again, you desperately need to fix this offensive line, and Ronnie Stanley would go a long way to doing that. You have to pay him probably, like, I would assume $3 to $5 million more than whatever Kansas City was going to offer him. You have to pay him, and it's probably going to be more than what he should be valued at this current stage in his career, age, injury history wise, like obviously production when he's healthy and he's playing one of the best at that position. But there are other things you could consider that could maybe knock his value a bit. But if you're New England, yeah, Mike Vrabel's exciting. Sure, Drake May looks positive for the team at the quarterback spot, but there's no guarantee they're even sniffing the playoffs over the next 2 seasons, let alone a Super Bowl appearance. So you have Super Bowl on one end, money on the other. In my eyes, the Patriots, with $100 and essentially $30 million in cap space, are probably about to spend near 25 to somewhere in the middle of 25 to 30 million. I'm not saying you're going to pay Ronnie Stanley 30 million. I'm just saying it's somewhere in that range there. You're probably paying him like 25 or so million or more to get him on your roster. You are paying him very high numbers to get him to come to you. You have to give him an offer he legitimately could not in good conscience say no to, because the money is just that crazy. You have the money to spend. I know maybe the idea of giving that much money to a singular player might not sound attractive to Patriots fans. That is fair, but the way the cap has jumped over the last 2 years with $55 million in growth, just imagine what the next 2 or 3 years are going to be like and where this cap room is going to be. We're going to be flirting with nearly $350 million in cap space over the next 2 or 3 years alone. What you pay Ronnie Stanley today will not feel like anything 2 or 3 years down the road. And at this point, it's about building a legitimate offensive line in front of Drake May and keeping him protected on his blind side. The next person, this one, again, I can't remember the numbering exactly. I think Bond was number 3 and then Darnold was number 4. If not, the numbers are flipped. I don't know. You can find it on NFL.com if you want the correct numbers. But the next person on Greg Rosenthal's list was Sam Darnold. Now, I have 3 teams in mind: Giants, Raiders, Titans. When trying to match up Sam Darnold with a quarterback mind that makes sense and is, I guess, similar to Kevin O'Connell, I fall towards the Titans. But then I also think, what about a guy like Brian Daboll? Quarterback whisperer, helped Josh Allen get to where he is. Yeah, it's been kind of a mess in New York, but I would not really put it on Daboll. I think that's more the Maras forcing Daniel Jones on him, and we all know what Daniel Jones is at this point as a quarterback. And you got a team like the Raiders, who, again, like I talked about, quarterback away from maybe putting together a competent offense, plus an addition like DK Metcalf, and next thing you know, you get a running back in the draft, and you're off and running as an offense altogether. So it could start in free agency as far as addressing that there. I went back and forth a lot on this, and for the Raiders, I don't know if Las Vegas wants to go with a Sam Darnold, because they've been kind of doing that, like just picking up a quarterback thing since Derek Carr left. And they've been very indecisive on paying too much money to people that are in the league already after letting Derek Carr go. I feel like they want to draft somebody. That's just the vibe that I'm getting and the gist of what seems to be going on. I could be completely off on this, and maybe they are very much in on Sam Darnold, but I feel like they want to draft someone. That's just kind of the feeling that I'm getting here. And that's why they've been kind of reluctant to pay other people in free agency the last few years. When I look at the Giants, the situation kind of makes sense, especially if they work on rebuilding the offensive line over there as well. And you expect that this offense ends up being better, minus Daniel Jones now, and with some improvements there. But seeing Daniel Jones go back to the New York market is part of the reason why I kind of am shying away from them, and it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Then you have the Tennessee Titans, and this is where I think my heart lies for this selection here, because you look at what Tennessee kind of has going right now. Pretty competent defense. Offense, though, the quarterback situation just was not it for them last year. I really like Brian Callahan. I think he's a great young offensive mind, similar vein of a Kevin O'Connell, to be able to have him come in and work within this offense. You already have Calvin Ridley, and depending on how you feel on him, whether he's still a number one or maybe just a really good number two and you have to find somebody else to pair alongside him, we'll see what happens there. But I mean, you do have Calvin Ridley. I also like the idea of bringing back Nick Westbrook-Akine. You add to the offensive line a bit. You have Tony Pollard, who is a capable running back. If he has a better passing game, I would assume running lanes open up a little bit more and we get more of the running back we saw in Dallas coming out of going into free agency when he signed with Tennessee. So for me, I really like the idea of him going to Tennessee. Just head coaching mind, situation is pretty good. You don't need a ton of work to get that offense in a position where you can feel comfortable with where they are. And again, Sam Darnold is young enough that if you get Sam Darnold before the last two games that he played this past season, Sam Darnold, you're feeling pretty good about what's going on. There might be a ceiling with Darnold, and maybe just when the lights are on the brightest, he cracks under the pressure, but that was, I would say, the closest he's gotten to those bright lights, and he at least has that experience now. And my hope is that if he's going to continue to grow, which we saw from him this year, that was a massive leap for him. You go from a guy that was either a backup quarterback or fumbling around with the Jets before he was released by them. You go from there to now all this growth last season working with Kevin O'Connell and even some of the work he had with Kyle Shanahan the year prior in that 49ers offense. Now getting the opportunity to play in the bright lights. Yeah, it was not great. It was not pretty. Definitely wish it could have gone a lot better for him, but he has the experience now, and he can take that with him and continue to grow going forward. And I think there's an opportunity for that, and the brightest opportunity for that would be in Tennessee. Josh Sweat's the fourth guy on this list here, and this is one, Chargers, Cardinals, and Titans again on here. Cardinals we also talked about earlier as well, but I ultimately gave Milton Williams to another team. Now, the Chargers. I had this put together before the Joey Bosa news because I was thinking, okay, Joey Bosa, Josh Sweat, that would be really fun. Now, I'm really starting to think Khalil Mack returns, Josh Sweat, and then you have yourself one hell of a unit of pass rushers there on the edges of your defense. That would be the Chargers' case at this point, especially with the money now really opened up for them. Cardinals, as we discussed earlier, 29th that was the Panthers, I'm sorry. They were like middle of the pack in sacks and pressure rate, but they definitely need improvement there. The way I see it, the Titans, there is a good case for them as well, especially with Harold Landry potentially going to walk, but we're tying up a lot of money with Sam Darnold going to them, so I think that's where that kind of gets lost there. I really like the idea of him going to Arizona. With them fourth most in cap currently right now, Arizona has the money, and this is a guy that I could see teams getting into a bit of a bidding war over because he seems like he has evolved into one of the top-end pass rushers in the NFL. And you can't have enough of those. You can't have enough of that in general. So I could see the Cardinals being the one to secure them out of these three teams or just any other teams looking to bid on him there. They have the money to do it. They need a big name producer on that defensive line to take them from, again, middle of the pack to even lower third somewhat to being maybe like a top 12 team in the NFL and really start to push those numbers towards being a competitive team on the defensive side of the football. And then lastly, we got Chris Godwin. We've talked about him a little bit already, but picking where he goes. The three teams I have in mind that I've seen him pegged to, the Patriots, very much talked about. The Steelers, this is one that I wasn't really anticipating until I saw a lot of people connecting dots with that and just what it would mean to have him paired alongside a guy like George Pickens kind of makes sense with what has been going on in Tampa Bay, him and Mike Evans paired together. And then, of course, you have a team like the Giants who need improvement in the wide receiver room. I'm a little bit torn on how this one goes because I really like the idea of Chris Godwin in Pittsburgh. The more I've read about it and the more I've kind of rolled the idea in my mind of just how it would work itself out, especially if they opt to go with Justin Fields. You want to have as much talent to work with him in the passing game as possible. Then a team like the Patriots who legitimately don't have a number one and may not even have a number two, just kind of depends on Pop Douglas's progression from this point forward. There is a lot to consider, but I do like the idea of the Giants maybe securing a wide receiver like a Chris Godwin for the sake of having a accomplished veteran wide receiver that has won a Super Bowl working alongside Malik Neighbors. So there is a good case to be made for each and every team, but I do think I'm going to go with the Giants on this one here. There are injury concerns with him, and we discussed that earlier as well, that I think could scare some teams off. And I do think that with that in mind, teams might not be willing to bid as high for him, or just maybe altogether might not have as much interest in him. And now that there's conversations surrounding DK Metcalf, maybe teams are a little bit more preoccupied trying to make that potential deal happen. Like, this could be one of those things where a team like the Giants, who are only 13th in cap space in total right now, could maybe use that to their advantage, where they, again, bring a guy like him to come in and work alongside. And with Darius Slayton set to hit free agency as well, like, this one makes sense. You let Slayton go. You don't have to worry about paying him because it sounds like he's going to have a pretty good wide receiver market. Like, there's a lot kind of working in the Giants' favor for this one here. And I like the idea of pairing Malik Neighbors with a vet like Chris Godwin, who's gotten it done. And then whatever you do at quarterback, in my eyes, in this situation here, you're probably drafting a quarterback at number 3. That's what you're going to set your young quarterback up with. A young, up-and-coming stud like Malik Neighbors. You're also going to have yourself, of course, Chris Godwin. Running back needs to get situated. Offensive line needs to get situated. That is stuff you can work on between free agency and the draft as well. But you at least know you have yourself a solid duo at wide receiver for the young quarterback that you're going to potentially have coming in.